what's the use of two strong legs if you only run away? And what use is the finest voice when you have nothing good to say? What good is strength and muscle if you only push and shove? And what's the use of two good ears when you can't hear those you love? It's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got. Yeah, it's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got.
Hi friends, welcome back to Seeds of Revolution. Today we have a great show for you. Speaking to us on the show is Amber Lowry. Amber is the older sister of defendant Savannah Batten. Savannah Batten is a member of what's being called the Prairieland Detention Center case. This was a case that happened down in Texas. The trial just concluded, but it had to do with a protest in Texas on July 4th, July 5th, 2025, an anti-ICE protest, which led to a whole lot of people being arrested, and now some people being convicted of, among other things, aiding and abetting terrorism. There's all sorts of allegations regarding Antifa and Black Bloc involvement, the Trump administration going after protesters and organizers, claiming they're domestic terrorists under the umbrella of Antifa. So there's a lot to unpack. Amber is a member of the Prairieland Defense Committee, which is a mixture of relatives, friends, and community members who have come together in the aftermath of the Prairieland case to educate us and to draw more attention to their friends and loved ones who are now behind bars looking at decades in prison. So Amber, welcome to Seeds of Revolution. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for your interest. We're very happy to talk about the case.
Well, and I would love for you just to start from the beginning. Our audience is mostly in Canada, so we're not as up to date on American current events as maybe we should be, or some of us go out of our way not to be. So those of us who haven't heard of Prairieland before, could you just give us a general background going into it? Who's involved with what? What are the allegations? What happened?
Yes, absolutely. So this starts all the way back July 4th of last year, 2025. You've got a group, several groups. There's a couple of different friend groups who have all run across an invitation in a wider Signal chat group to a noise demonstration that will be held on that night of July 4th. And it's a noise demonstration where they're going to get together and make some noise. A couple of the protesters decided to actually do a really nice fireworks display for the detainees being held inside the detention center. And for future reference, it's Prairieland Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas, which is kind of um, a little more rural area just off of the DFW Metroplex. So most people, even in DFW here, don't know that this place exists. Everybody's talking about all of the new concentration camps that are coming up and, all the buildings that ICE is buying up. Most Texans don't even know that this place is down here. So anyway, this group of friends, they get together, and again, several groups of friends, just to keep facts straight, because that was a big thing that the government used, was that this was an Antifa terror cell. Some of these people did not even know each other, had literally never met before this night. Okay, so they show up. There's people who have maracas, and some people, like I said, some of the protesters did the fireworks display for the detainees inside. And there were just a bunch of, now there were a couple of people who, I believe one of them was a kid who came up from College Station, who sort of broke off from the group. No one really knew who he was. He broke off from the group and did some spray painting. I guess he popped a couple of tires, maybe broke a camera. But for the most part, almost all of the Prairieland defendants were, literally just there. Fireworks displayed, had some sparklers. My sister actually had 2 jars of coins that she brought to sort of shake as maracas. And so at some point, after about 10:45 p.m., something happened. And by this time, most of the protesters have already been instructed by a warden at Prairieland, Officer Reedy, to leave the premises. He came out and he spoke face to face with them and told them, "You're on government property. You need to leave." And so they start cleaning up their trash and they leave. So most
Now,
of the people
now,
are,
Amber, if I can interject for a
yeah, yeah,
second,
no, go ahead.
before we get into what happened, can you just give us some more background information about your sister, Savannah? I'm curious what her politics were, what her experience with protest and anti-ICE actions were. How does she
Yeah.
fit into this story as
Well, I think she would say she's not political at all, and I get it in this context. It's absolutely political, but she is just all about um, finding needs, finding people who are struggling, and finding animals who are struggling. Ever since she was 12 years old, she's been involved in animal rights activism, environmental activism, anything dealing with human rights, anti-war. She's been in that community for 20 years. So it wasn't unusual for her to be attending a protest or and especially with all of the stuff going on with ICE, and keeping in mind this is before all of the crazy ICE stuff happened in Minnesota. I mean, this was like, a few months before that happened. So,
and how old was Savannah when all this happened?
she is 30. She's 32. I believe she'll turn 33 this year.
And it looks like from the website, from the Defense Committee website, that most of the people, if not all of them involved, look like they're in their 20s or 30s. I mean, these are young people who were involved in this action.
Yeah, for the most part, I think there were a couple who are closer to my age in their 40s, but yeah, mostly it's a lot of younger people.
Okay. So they're outside of the detention center, they're making noise, the warden tells them to go home,
Mhm.
and
Yep,
then
and so there's that particular group of 5. We actually ended up seeing in court the video of them leaving and being arrested. They again, they have CCTV and they've got all of the officer body worn cameras, so we're able to actually see this happening finally during trial. Um, One of the first things that I noticed as this group of 5 who was asked to leave by Officer Reedy, as they're walking by, they actually are allowed to walk through I would like a sea of police officers who have responded by this time. So these people had no idea that they're apparently somewhere in this area shots were fired. And so this group of protesters who's leaving, they don't know that. There's several others still on Prairieland property who also don't know that shots have been fired allegedly. It's pretty chaotic. I would imagine there's fireworks. There's not only fireworks at the detention center, but there's hundreds of people shooting off fireworks all right here in the same sort of area, not related to Prairieland. So anyway, they leave and I see them all walking on video. I see them all walking by the police officers. And the first thing I notice is that a big thing that has propped up this case is that the government claimed that they were all wearing head to toe, like black tactical, like high dollar military gear. Well, imagine my surprise. I see all of these people walking by. Most of them are wearing blue jeans. Everyone almost is wearing white sneakers. I see a pair of like gray or silver basketball shorts and a blue jersey. So these people are not even wearing what the government claims they were wearing.
where was anybody dressed, and I hate using this word, but was anybody dressed in a tactical or military way? Because I know there was some discussion. The government claims before the protest, there was some discussion in the signal chats about, bringing tactical gear, bringing vests, that sort of thing, bringing guns to the protest.
Yeah, and so I did see a couple of vests, but what ends up happening is that in court, several officers. Well, I'll go specifically to the evidence room manager at Johnson County, who actually was the one who was responsible for going through evidence piece by piece, photographing. And she ends up being asked on the stand almost piece by piece, everyone's clothing. Is this tactical? Is this tactical? Nothing. She said no. There was one item that could have been called tactical that was actually in use being worn. And this was determined to be a pair of pants that's apparently popular with roofers and just outdoorsmen that is sold at Walmart. So it's like,
Basically, it's something with a lot of pockets that they then call tactical.
exactly. And there was like a helmet, there were like maybe 2 vests. One of the officers ended up having to clarify after the fact that he said, oh yeah, there was, everybody was wearing bulletproof vests. Well, he says in the end, this ends up being that several of them are wearing backpacks, which he mistook for bulletproof vests. And he says this on statement.
That's some amazingly bad eyesight to mistake a backpack for a bulletproof fucking vest.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, um, again, as these protesters are leaving, no one knows that shots have been fired allegedly. Um, and so I won't until you're ready for me to do so. I won't go into what we actually learned about the shooting. But I mean, that's the gist of it, is that this was a legitimate noise demonstration. This was not a bunch of people suited up to go to war, as was described. This, what sounded like to me a suicide mission, if anything. And it ends up not being that.
Yeah, and if you could go into the details of the shooting, and also for our listeners, again, being up in Canada, we don't have the same references sometimes that you all have down south. If you could also talk about, what the prosecution claimed in terms of the gun clubs that were alleged to be involved in this, or people's alleged involvement in gun clubs. I know the John Brown gun club and the Socialist Rifle Association specifically were mentioned by the prosecution. So when you talk about the shooting, if you could talk about that as well, I think that would be really enlightening.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't keep in mind, I'm kind of out in the periphery here. I'm not a member of any of these clubs. What I know, I learned in court about this. I do know a couple of defendants were members of the Socialist Rifle Association. Most were not, is what I'm understanding.
And
Um,
to your knowledge, what is the Socialist Rifle Association?
well, I mean, I guess, and again, with you guys being in Canada, it's probably not the best comparison to the NRA.
All of our rifles are socialist up here, so it's hard to tell.
It's similar to any right wing. It's like National Rifle Association. You got the NRA. You've got any gun club. It's literally it's a club of people who get together. There are folks who are new. There are folks who are more experienced, and they'll teach. They'll have courses. They'll have gun safety trainings. They'll have what they call range days, which is where they'll take folks out and they'll help you learn proper gun safety and shooting techniques and stances. And then also they would have what they called gun and tells, which is where it would be a big gathering of like-minded people who would get together and bring their equipment, and it would be like any other gun show. It's all displayed out on a table, and you can go and and look at what people have and try stuff out. I mean, just general. It was no different from any other gun club.
Okay. But obviously with a left-wing socialist leaning.
Right. Yeah.
Got it. And so what did you learn about the shooting now, was your sister present for the shooting?
She was not. She was actually one of the group of 5 who had already left the Prairieland, they weren't on Prairieland property anymore. They had walked down the street as Officer Reedy told them, basically get out. They were actually walking. My understanding is that the shooting happened as they were just getting back to the cars to leave. I mean, they were far, far away, several football fields from where the alleged shooting took place. And I don't know why I'm still calling it an alleged shooting. The trial's over, but yeah.
What happened with the shooting? How did that transpire?
So what we're told at first, and keeping in mind the government was very, very quiet about it throughout, the time between, July 4th and trial. So they were not forthcoming. They did withhold a lot of discovery. In hindsight, I can see why. What we were told is that this group of, insurgents basically, descended upon Prairieland, and, that they were shooting up the place, and that they were trying to break into the place, and that they, basically went there with the intention of killing law enforcement and ICE agents. Well, what ends up really happening, and we learned this about 1 week into trial, because this is coincidentally the same day, or actually when this came out, the night that this came out, the prosecution actually went and filed an emergency motion to bar the defense from using self-defense or defense of others. Yeah. As soon as they realized we knew what had happened, they filed this motion. So what actually ends up happening is that there are 2 protesters, and I'm not going to say their names because I had some confusion about which was which because I don't know any of them, and so these two random boys, I can tell you, um, were leaving, and one of them was the one who did the spray painting, and so they're both completely unarmed. One has a can of spray paint in his hand, and so what happens is that um, Lieutenant Gross, before he's even out of his vehicle, already has his gun out and is flailing it around. His feet haven't even hit the ground yet, and so
And now,
um,
Lieutenant Gross, if we can back up for a second, how did he get involved in this situation?
So Lieutenant Gross is the officer who was said to have been shot in. They first said he was shot in the neck, out the back, and then it was out the back in the neck. Um, Whatever happened with him being shot and the whole shootout is still very mysterious.
But I guess
Um,
I guess what I meant is he a prison employee? How does he end up
oh,
at
I'm so sorry. No, he is he's with Alvarado PD.
Okay, so he's with the local police department.
That's correct. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I assuming somebody in the prison probably called the local police to help break up the protest.
There was a 911 call that was made about 20 minutes into, the fireworks display, wherein someone stated that, that we're being attacked, we're under attack, people are trying to get into the facility. It's a woman guard, I cannot remember her name, but she's, based on what she's been told, she sounds very terrified, and then, um of course, we end up finding out later every officer from every agency who testified that night said no one tried to breach either of the gates. No one tried to enter the facility. There was no damage done to the facility. All of this ends up not being true.
Yeah.
So
So Lieutenant Gross shows up after the 911 call. What happens then?
yes. Yes, he is first on the scene responding to this 911 call, and again, he jumps out of his vehicle, already has his gun drawn, and his, I understand that he has the little flashlight attachment for his gun. And so, he is immediately begins chasing 2 fleeing protesters, both of which are not armed, and you can see, I mean, like I said, his flashlight illuminates them as they're running. You can see that neither of them is armed. And so he's in a stance where he's getting ready to take a shot at these 2 men's backs, and apparently what ends up happening, and you have to understand, Defendant's song is a Marine reservist, and I didn't realize this,
And
but he is.
this is a man named Benjamin Song who was one of the protesters, right?
That's correct, and I think they actually use they them pronouns and go by Champagne. But yes, I always say Benjamin Song because I know that's what's out in the media. So just so no one thinks I'm misgendering or dead name. But
Sorry.
yes,
So they
no, that's okay.
they were in the Marines and they came to the protest with a rifle. Is that correct?
Well, I say this to say, and this is uncomfortable for people to hear, but I have learned, in the months since this all happened, if Song wanted someone to be killed that night, they would have been dead. I mean, we'll just suffice it to say he's a very, very skilled marksman. So when we learned that, and I will tell you, the law enforcement tried to cover this up because they ended up finding actually the pit marks in the pavement. So all of this talk of, oh, they shot up, shot up, shot up. No, he fired 8 shots into the ground of suppressive fire. Not even, it was like a quarter of the distance between Song and the officer. He fires these 8 rounds into the pavement to allow these 2 protesters to escape because Gross is about to shoot them in the back. And law enforcement defended this. They said they were completely justified in if Lieutenant Gross had shot those 2 men in the back that night, it would have been completely good shot, justified in doing so, even though they're unarmed. But yes, we end up finding out that the shot that allegedly hit Lieutenant Gross, and again, we still have a lot of questions about that because keep in mind, the government has never provided, I've never seen a photo, I've never seen a video, they won't produce medical records. My understanding is that the officer was released from the hospital within 2 hours. And so, not to say that something didn't happen, but he was not shot through the neck. He was pegged, is what they're saying, by a ricochet shot. And they actually showed the defense, I guess, had the bullet or whatever was left of it removed from where it was lodged in the vest, and saw that it was it was kind of shaped like a banana, like the metal was warped and shaped as a banana, and it had these what they call defects in it which they determined, this is not something that happened from hitting human flesh. This ricocheted off a car or the pavement. And so they get into looking at it, and the defense is able to identify the area in the pavement, and based on the CCTV video showing that he was never aiming his gun at the officer. He shot into the ground.
What happens after the shooting?
So after the shooting, um, so there's the group of 5 protesters who are up on, I believe it's Sunflower Lane, and they end up getting sat down by the officers who had just let them walk by. They said they showed the video and showed them all walking by, and they're, nobody's panicked. No one's, they're walking casually by. The officers said, good evening to them. They say it back and they keep walking. Well, then a few minutes later, they end up going back and following them. They've almost reached the car by this time, and they go and they set them all down on the ground. And we end up seeing that video, which was pretty horrifying because they're all doing exactly, nobody was arguing, they sat down when the officer said to sit down, and they told them, you're not under arrest, you're not even detained. But then several officers come in, one of who, what is his name? I need to remember this officer's name. There's one officer in particular who starts waving his gun around. He's pointing it at people. I had to see my sister with a gun to her head, and he starts telling them, nobody move or you'll be shot. And I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here, but he tells them, don't play with me.
Feel free to swear. We love swearing on this podcast.
Yeah. So his exact words are, they a couple of them did say, I don't consent to a search, because they had no idea what was going on at the time. So they sat down and, they said they would talk to them, but they said, I do not consent to a search. This is what you say when you're getting hemmed up by the police. Well, the police end up not arresting, not detaining them because they don't want to trigger their Miranda. And so still they start grabbing backpacks off of these people. And it's like, they're not detained, they're not under arrest, and there's no danger, right? So they've already taken off these backpacks and separated them from the defendant. And then we end up finding out again as we're viewing this video that the officers in that moment, they did an illegal search of everyone's backpacks. So technically, the first aid kits, which is like the most terrifying thing that they found, is that first aid kits shouldn't have even been used as evidence. But of course, your listeners may not know, but Texas is pretty much, I would say by far, we're the most corrupt law enforcement state that there is. So there's no, it's like, oh, they can't do that. It's illegal. It's illegal. Well, it's like, this is Texas. They do whatever they want.
Right.
So yeah.
What happened in terms of the government's case against your sister and the other defendants for helping Champagne escape? They allege that there was some zines being moved, some cell phones being moved. What are those allegations having to do with the aftermath of the protests and the shooting?
That's the saddest part of all of this. Any one of these defendants, had they stood trial on their own, had they not been smashed together and mischaracterized as this whole cell of people, almost all of them would have done no jail time, first of all. Of course, there's graffiti, there's, tires got popped and that wasn't supposed to happen. And, that's fine. And then, the shooting, things get difficult with the shooting as well. And it's like, again, I will always say that if these 9 people hadn't been smashed together, and then we get sent to the most, to the most MAGA federal court in Texas, and it's like, I don't even know how to explain it.
What were those allegations like when it came to all of the stuff that happened in the aftermath? What is the government?
Well, the thing of it is, you have to understand there's so many moving parts. So they start showing all of these zines. They go to people's homes and they take out, they go to people's home gun safes and take out the guns. They take pictures of these hundreds and hundreds of guns. They're submitting into evidence pictures of gun intels where there's guns out on the table. And they're saying things like, oh, these guns were never recovered. It's like, it's not their guns. There were a total of 4 guns around the grounds of Prairieland. Most of those were, I think one was on the property, which is what Song had. The others were not even on Prairieland property. These were left in vehicles. And then all of the guns they showed in court, they brought from people's home. Mm-hmm. Same with the zines. They start bringing up the zines, and all of the zines and the stickers and the all of this stuff. It's being used to in the Emma Goldman Book Club. They used all of this to basically solidify the idea of, this Antifa terror cell. They mischaracterized a book club, Emma Goldman Book Club, which is a literal book club. They made up this whole story about how this is a recruitment center for new Antifa cell members. And so that's where all of the stuff with the zines came in, is that, this is these, they tried to basically make it sound like, one or more of these people are like the cult leader, and like all of these zines and propaganda. And it's like the zines are like movie reviews. And there was one that was a story about two sisters. One of them had died of cancer. And so they start showing the names of these zines, and the government admits they never read any of them, but they show the titles because they sound scary, which is kind of how they end up drawing the jury in.
What about the allegations about other people helping Champagne Song escape from the scene or stay hidden from the government?
So the people who have the charges relating to helping Champagne escape, they are less known to me, because I have been very involved in the case of just involving the nine, just because that's where the bulk of the work that I've done, in doing jail support is.
Okay.
But my understanding is that the people who were arrested in relation to the manhunt, as they call it, um, they're most of the cooperators. I mean, there's a couple that were actually at Prairieland, but it sounds like that those conversations took place. I guess there was some messaging between Song and a roommate, and then a couple of other people that are not known to me at all. So, I mean, I don't have a lot of information about that. But yeah, I mean, that was all relating to, I guess, Song was hidden in a field for about 24 hours after all of this happened. And so I guess a couple of people had kind of, I guess he had been in contact with his roommate, and a couple of people were kind of trying to facilitate getting him out of it. And so that's where those came from.
Got it. So eventually, how does the government, how does your sister find out that she's been indicted? How does this case take shape?
Well, it doesn't happen for a really long time. And again, I'm going to cite Texas having, the United States, our judicial system is very broken, but Texas is a very special situation beyond what anyone else can imagine. And so we don't follow any of the guidelines of, there's like, you're supposed to have it. You're supposed to, you have the right to an attorney as soon as you say so. Well, they didn't let any, I don't know exactly what the day count was for other defendants. I can tell you they didn't let an attorney in to see my sister until her 9th day of incarceration. They stopped these people from making phone calls. They did not allow them to contact attorneys. They didn't allow attorneys in to see them. It was my understanding in hindsight is that first couple of weeks, they were just hard and heavy, sending federal agents in to rough these people up and scream and yell and threaten them, and basically get people on the hook with plea deals.
So your sister has been in custody ever since the immediate aftermath of the protest?
Yes. Mhm.
Now, can you talk to us about some of the people? I don't know that the names necessarily are relevant unless you think so, but can you talk about the people who chose to cooperate with the government and testify, protesters who chose to testify against other protesters in exchange for a more lenient sentence?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll tell you one, I have a suspicion was actually a government plant from the beginning. And this is a kid who no one knew who he was. And he came from a couple of hours away to participate in this noise demonstration at Prairieland.
Uh-huh.
Um, the others, I can tell you from what I've learned of them and watching their testimony, this is the saddest part of it all, because especially early on in Johnson County is it's like a complete hellhole. It's everyone there is abused. I mean, physical abuse. People get pepper sprayed there all the time. The Prairieland defendants had to basically, some of them play doula for a woman giving birth in her cell because they would not call an ambulance for her back in September. I mean, it's a literal hellhole. This is where, people go to just disappear. It's really bad. So looking at some of the people who took plea deals, I noticed that it's the young guys. There's an elderly woman. I believe she's 70 or close to it. And a very young girl. I believe she's 21 or 22 years old. And the two women, their testimony was heartbreaking because you could just tell. Well, Lynette Sharp, I'll say her name specifically because she came very, very close on the stand to basically breaking her plea deal because um, when she would ask these questions, she would kind of look back and forth between the judge and the prosecutor, and you could just, she was like a deer in headlights. And so when it came time, she basically, the prosecutor had her read this fact resume that was along with her plea deal saying, I attest that this person is Antifa. I attest that this person is Antifa. I attest that we've done this and we've done this and we've done this. But when it came to actual questioning, they asked her, the defense attorneys asked her everything on there. Do you identify as an Antifa cell member? No. Have you ever said that any of these people were Antifa cell members? No, 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 all the way down. So the judge ends up getting pissed off and he's like, you do know that it is a crime to lie in federal court. And so then Lynette starts to say, look, I was in Johnson County. I signed because I was in Johnson County and these guys are telling me you're going to die in here. They beat her up. They stole her hearing aids. I mean, and this is an elderly woman and she's got health problems. They withheld medication from her and it's a bad situation. So that is how I would say all of these. I know what it cost my sister to resist lying and saying she did a bunch of stuff she didn't do. I know what it cost her and she's young and strong. So I can imagine that all of these plea deals, other than one, which was very gleefully entered into, but the rest were extracted under great threat of violence and in Lynette Sharp's fear of that she literally was going to be killed by these people who were, you know.
And what was the role of the expert witness in this case, Kyle Scheidler? Because I know that this is the person with a really terrible background who seems to be the government's star witness in tying your sister and her friends to a purported Antifa Black Bloc, you know, organization.
Yes. So, wow. Yeah, that was a mess because it's the moment that I realized, and I don't know a ton about him. I mean, I'm aware of him, and he's not somebody that I try to follow prior to this. But
Well, could you give us the basic outline of who he is and what he testified to?
yeah, well, so basically, so oh, sorry, I think I just hit my window. So basically, yes, his name is Kyle Scheidler, and you might hear people calling him Antifa Kyle is kind of a nickname that he picked up. So yes, he is the director, senior analyst for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism at the Center for Security Policy. And so before, not everyone knows this as you just hear that, oh, it sounds really official, but it's actually like a very xenophobic and racist sort of like think tank. If there's something going on right now that you know of, and again, this is very big in Texas. If all of a sudden, your far right politicians are super, anti-Muslim and Sharia law, Kyle Scheidler is kind of the driving force behind that. And similar with Antifa, he's kind of the guy who defines all of these things for the government.
And that his group has been labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So he comes to court, and what's his testimony? What does he say?
Well, I mean, he's very sure of himself and speaks, with authority on all of these things. But then, the defense attorneys they start questioning kind of what are your qualifications and what data is what data are all your claims based on? And it ends up coming out that he's basically just, he's just a sort of, manosphere bro that's like on the internet reading about. He's like says he got a lot of his expertise or all of his expertise is from open source material, websites and reading Reddit, and he even says reading signal chats. And they're like, oh yeah, well how many Antifa signal chats have you been in on? And he says, Oh, well, none. I mean, just these signal chats from this case is the first, signal chats that I've actually been privy to. And it's like, there's nothing about Antifa or shooting a cop in any of these signal chats. So what are you talking about? And yes, it does end up coming up once it becomes painfully obvious that he has no idea what he's talking about. They're literally they're showing pictures of these flags, and Sean Smith, he's the assistant U.S. attorney, and he's examining Kyle Scheidler, and they start pulling out these flags and even just pictures and stickers of flags, and you're hearing things like, "Okay, do you know what this flag is?" And it's like, "Yeah, that's the Antifa flag." And then the prosecutor might say, "Do you know any? Do you recognize this as an anarcho-communist flag?" And it's like the same flag. And then someone asks, one of the defense attorneys actually has looked up one of the flags, and he's like, "Would you be surprised to learn that this is a flag from like a Spanish movement, like back in the whatever, it had nothing to do with Antifa." And he's like, no." It's so bad. I cannot even express to you.
Was his testimony, do you think, how important was his testimony to convicting the defendants?
Well, I think it was very important because, anytime you start to realize you put somebody up on the stand and it's like, "Oh, this guy's an expert." And it can't be overstated the sheer volume of just stuff that was thrown at these people.
Yeah.
Um, he probably, I would think, people who have no idea what any of this means, they probably said, "Oh, this guy, he's an expert. He knows about, Antifa, Antifa, Antifa." If you say it enough times, people start to believe it. So I would, and he was intimately involved in all of this. He tried to later deny it, but he did end up letting it slip on the stand that he is basically the author of the definition of Antifa that the government used to sort of like classify all of these different leftist, causes and organizations. He wrote the definition, and he had input in writing the indictments and the criminal complaints for all of these too. And I'm telling you, he was with them. All of the other witnesses were made to leave the room. Like they couldn't, there were rules about who could and couldn't sit in on other testimony. Or he is like holding hands with Sean Smith this whole time. I mean, they were never separated. And then I can also tell you that Kyle Scheidler is sitting in the courtroom, and he's sending text messages to Andy No, who is another, some of if you guys are into this kind of stuff, some of you might be aware of him, but he's another self-proclaimed Antifa expert that is, so Scheidler is sending Andy No, and they're saying these insane things. They're literally telling people that our court support down in the courtyard is blocking traffic and smashing out car windows. I mean, they're literally making these things up to put out there, like live tweeting from court.
It sounds like the case is specious and largely in a lot of ways. Any idea what might have convinced the jury to hand down so many convictions? Because, to spoil the ending, the Prairieland defendants were all convicted of various charges, including aiding and abetting terrorism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say probably. mm, I mean, his testimony helps certainly. I mean, if you're not fact checking him in real time, which of course the jurors can't do, it sounds like anything else. Fake it till you make it, get up on the stand and do all this. Um, and I'll also say this: I'm not entirely convinced that the jury was convinced. We had an issue. Um, this is actually our second jury pool. Just to really quickly drop this, if you recall, the trial was actually supposed to start on February 17th. There was a mistrial over allegedly a lawyer's shirt, which then caused us to call a whole new jury pool for the following week, twice as big. We needed twice as many jurors just in case someone wore a shirt that the judge didn't like again. So you have that. That was an issue that came up. But then with this jury, during so let's go back. Let's go to Thursday, the day before. This would have been Thursday, March 12th. This would be the first full day of jury deliberation. The jury sent handwritten notes out to Judge Pittman wanting to review transcripts of testimony from Lynette Sharp and Susan Kent. And keep in mind, those are the two that I told you. Those were the ones who literally went through their entire fact resume and said, yeah, I signed this, but that's not true. I signed this under threat of violence and fear for my life, but it's not true. So they wanted to review those, and Judge Pittman said no. He said, I don't do that. I never have provided transcripts. You just have to go off what you remember. So, so that was Thursday before the verdict. So then on Friday's verdict day, about an hour before the verdict came in, there was a really loud uproar. And I when I relayed this to people, I've said it kind of sounded like a kids' party, just a lot of voices, just loud yelling. You couldn't
Uproar.
make out what was being
Sorry, Amber.
said.
Sorry, Amber.
Uh,
Sorry, Amber. An uproar from the jury room.
We ended up finding later that yes, it was coming from the jury room. So there's a bunch of us relatives and friends of the defendants, and we're seated outside of the locked courtroom. They have benches out here, and we're just waiting, talking quietly amongst ourselves. And yes, we hear this loud uproar coming from my right, sort of around the corner. And it's like, we do know that the jury room is right around there. I didn't know it at the time, but yes, this uproar is absolutely coming from the jury room. And some kind of fight took place. I'm not going to go into detail because we've learned more since then that we're basically hoping that this ends up in an investigation, because there is suspicion of, I don't know, that people have called it possible jury malfeasance. They've said that there is concern that people were intimidated into, kind of going against the what they felt was right. We did have 2 male jurors openly crying while the verdict was being read. And so all of these little details, once you put them together, something happened. We're not sure what. Something happened in that jury room. And so we're following that.
Can you tell us a little about the charges specifically that the defendants were convicted of?
Yes. So, obviously there's, Song was being accused of basically attempting to, so in the beginning, everyone had all of the same charges. Everyone was charged with firing the gun. Everyone was charged with everything. And so that was really confusing for us. But in the end, they ended up, I guess, realizing that they were not going to be able to pin people for certain things. And so, throughout the trial, we're able to view the body camera footage, and we know everyone who shot a gun. We know everyone who popped a tire and everyone who did this and that. I mean, everyone knows. It was very well established, each of those crimes that were committed, in civil disobedience or whatever. But what they end up doing is that since they can't get most people on any of those charges, they pinned all of the charges on them, but they called it riot, and they called it providing material support for terrorism. And each of those charges, like in Savannah's case, she was found guilty. She was convicted of 4 charges, and it was like riot and then conspiracy to riot. And then she was convicted of carrying explosives and conspiracy to carry explosives. So it's like Savannah, and I don't say this to hold her up against any other protester. I don't, she's innocent. Savannah showed up after the fireworks were almost over, never had her touched a gun, never had her touched a firework, didn't break, didn't pop, didn't paint. She literally stood on the grass and shook her little coin jars. That's all she did. She left when the officer told her to, but she's still been convicted of all of this conspiracy and explosives. We're calling legal fireworks sold out of fireworks stand down the road, explosives.
And what is the minimum and maximum sentence she is looking at? And before you answer, to our Canadian listeners who are unfamiliar with American sentencing, I suggest you sit down before Amber answers, because people might not believe it. But if you could tell us, the minimum and the maximum Savannah's looking at.
Yeah, so so each of her individual charges, if I remember correctly, are a minimum of 10. It might be a minimum of 10 and a max of 15, but see, since she's got the 4, Savannah, for just being there, is facing 60 years. And so anybody who got the double charge, you're charged with fireworks and you're charged with conspiracy to have fireworks, that's potentially 30 years. And let's be honest, the judge is going to max out the sentences. He is. I mean,
So the absolute minimum, the minimum legal sentence she's looking at is 10 years. And if the judge max out the charges and runs them consecutively, she's looking at
Mhm.
40 years?
60 years.
So
Des is
your
looking
sister
at 40 for the zine.
so your sister's looking at a 10 to 60-year sentence.
Yep, that's right.
Wow. And you're saying Des is looking at a 40-year minimum sentence?
Yep, so the box that he picked up from that house, that is the box of his own belongings. The box has not been opened or added to since 2022. I mean, that is proven by the items that are in it and dated. It's a box. There were like love letters from his wife, stickers, his own artwork, all of these things. 40 years he's facing for taking, and not only that. So the government claimed, and they said this to people. They said this to random strangers who approached. I think that people thought that he was like maybe he was being detained or like they were trying to deport him. And so when he was being arrested, someone actually came up and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" Well, and the officer said to this person that he was carrying a bomb and that they think he killed someone. So they look at this box and they start to say, "Oh, this box, we're sure he's carrying an IED." He goes and leaves this box on an apartment by an apartment door, right? If he's not trying to hide it or anything, and the government swears there's an IED in this box, but they leave it sat there for 10 minutes at first, and then they leave to go follow him after he's left, and they leave this IED sitting on a porch, right? But it's like this is the kind of thing that just by playing up and dramatizing, what they thought could have been in this box. I mean, that's exactly how this happened. It's just, they threw so much nonsense at the jury. It's like by the end, does the jury understand that this was never an IED? There was never a bomb in this box, and the government knew it wasn't a bomb, or they wouldn't have driven away and left it sitting out there. But it's just these kind of like tricks that they use.
Yeah. We're running up against an hour, and I don't want to monopolize all of your time, but if you could tell us, more about Savannah in particular, how she's doing, how her spirits are holding up, if she has hopes of this being thrown out on appeal, what is her personal path going forward look like?
Well, I will tell you, the first few days were really hard, as you can imagine. I mean, felt she felt really betrayed. I thought it was interesting because, like I said, where I am involved in local politics, like I work on elections and things like that, and she's just like she's kind of disgusted with the whole thing, and she doesn't participate. She does mutual aid work, and she's kind of down in the trenches, helping like people on the ground. So for me to find out that she actually did feel very betrayed, she was sure that the jury was going to be able to see through the government's nonsense, and that she didn't expect that they were going to convict her. So that was really hard. But in the days that followed, I think that we sort of we talked it out more, and I explained to her I said, first of all, the journalists who were in the courtroom with us are all just horrified because they know the truth. They've seen what has happened. They see the trickery that's being used. Um, the judge was really did not want press in the room, and it was very packed. He moved us into a tiny courtroom where there wasn't even enough room for all of the family that wanted to be in, let alone press. And there was just a big, bunch of stuff. So I told her, you have to think about this as, the worst has happened now. You're convicted. Um, Go ahead and prepare for the fact that Pittman is going to max these sentences out because it's his job to, hold up the sort of MAGA, the MAGA narrative here. It's his job to, he doesn't want to be called a Democrat activist judge, which is what our local Republican politicians, if that jury had not convicted these guys, then Pittman would be getting attacked by the MAGAs and they'd be calling him a Democrat activist judge. I said, all of this was going to happen. It's okay. This is going to be overturned, and it is, because no one in America can afford for it not to be overturned. I mean, you're talking about you just let them criminalize things like wearing black clothing, whether you're really wearing black clothing or not. You're placing all these things. Texas, which is like a Second Amendment strong, like you don't ask anybody, you don't put any stipulations on where anybody can carry their gun. But now we're like, oh, guns at a protest. And it's like, all of these things, no one's going to be willing to give up these rights for themselves in order to, get Antifa, as they say. I mean, no, fireworks on the 4th of July, that's a sign of terrorism? Really? In Texas. It's things like that that make me so sure this isn't going to stand. There's too much insanity that happened with this trial. A lot of irregularities, a lot of very strange things happened. So no.
Are your sister's spirits holding up?
Yeah. I mean, I think that in realizing that, I think it's easier for us to just kind of, keep moving forward because, it's going to be over. It's not going to be over in 60 years. It's going to be over.
That's great. Well, if people want to support Savannah and support the other defendants, what is the best way for them to do it?
So we have a website, www.prairielanddefendants.com, and that is going to be probably the most complete information source. I mean, we've got there's donation links. We do have a Give, Send, Go, which is the purpose of that is to be used for lawyer fees. I mean, we need a lot of lawyers. We're going to have to assemble like an Avengers team of appellate lawyers for the next step in the process. So. We've got information about how you can write to our defendants. They do love receiving letters and supportive notes. We are on social media we're on Twitter. We're on, some of us are on TikTok. DFW Support Committee is the handle for the Twitter account, the Instagram account. Follow, share our stories. The court notes are on our website as well. Read the court notes. Now, if you read the court notes and you have an idea of what really happened, then you can talk to other people about the Prairieland defendants, and you can clean up misinformation. And it's important because what people don't understand is this case is going to impact all of us, every single one of us. If you live in America, the Prairieland case, something about it is going to have a connection to you. It's going to change the way that you do activism.
I think that's a really important note to end on. So before we go, I just wanted to read the names of all the Prairieland defendants because I do think it's important that we identify each person as a person and we remember them as individuals, not just as members of a group that the government is seeking to oppress and imprison, but as individuals who stood by their beliefs and they deserve to be recognized. That's Autumn Hill, Benjamin Champagne Song, Daniel Des Rolando Sanchez Estrada, Dario Sanchez, Elizabeth Soto, Ines Soto, Janet Gehring, Joy Rowan Gibson, Lucy Folks, Maricela Rueda, Megan Morris, Rebecca Morgan, Savannah Batten, and Zachary Evans. Those are the Prairieland defendants we've been talking about, and we've been joined by Amber Lowry. Amber is the sister of Savannah, and she is a member of the Prairieland Defense Committee. So, Amber, thank you so much for talking to us today about your sister and about the case. And thank you for being on Seeds of Revolution.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We appreciate you covering
Jesus
this.
Christ came back today like you threatened he will. Which poor group of people do you think that he would kill? And who would Jesus choose to starve if you gave him the chance? And if there was a genocide, would he take a neutral stance? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would he say it's complicated and there's sinners on both sides? Or would he say that some people, they just deserve to die? If Jesus Christ rose from the dead and on a sidewalk slept, would you extend your hand to him or just watch where you stepped? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus hate the gay folk the queer folk or the trans? Would he suggest they end their lives according to God's plans? Would Jesus tell a homeless man to get a fucking job, or turn his back on the poor? Would Jesus be a snob? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus build a border wall? Would Jesus drive a tank? Would Jesus be a landlord? Would Jesus run a bank? Would Jesus Christ feel safe in his skin if he came to your town? And would you still believe in him if you found out he was brown? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Yeah, who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well,